Okay, hi everybody. So this will be episode 5 of the Down to Earth podcast. My name's Amelia. If you don't know me at this point, I actually got my episode number wrong on the last one. Looking back at my YouTube account, I was like, "Oh, just kidding, just kidding." That was actually episode 4, and this is actually episode 5. So in this podcast episode, I'm actually going to be talking to you, reflecting generally just like on my quarter, how it's been. I'm going to be doing a slightly more personal version of this than I usually do because Hume Core is something, like I think often the humanities are, something that's just really personal to my heart. And I feel like really connected to a lot of aspects of me because coming into this I was actually like an art history major and French double major with a minor in archaeology, so I'm a couple of things, but I'm definitely a humanities person like through and through in my heart. But I was really touched senior year, especially when I was taking both environmental sciences and also AP Gov at the same time, that I felt this need, I felt this really deep desire apart from just learning art history, that I felt like I was like, I need to do more, I feel, than just like talk about art because I love talking about art, but like I want to do more than just that. And I think I became really close with a lot of the various like environmental situation that was around my campus and that I could do on campus. I was a part of the aquaponics club for a while, helping out with that. My school didn't have a gardening club or anything like that, but we did have a local garden that I served as an ambassador for, which was very fun. I got paid for it. It was lovely. I got to work at a community garden. Um, feel really connected to my community, and I actually like got to even like learn about like native pollinators, and I got to take like art classes through it. It was amazing. It was wonderful. It was this just absolutely amazing experience that made me feel like, oh, like this is something that is really important, and it's something that I deeply resonate with. And so I think I've been trying this year um, because I know that I'm not someone who is fully a science person. I know I'm not someone who wants to go do biomedical engineering. That's not me. That's not where my skills lie. I could do it, but I don't think I would be happy. I don't think that that's my calling. And so I've been trying to search through Humanities Core, and I think I'll continue to search as I take the sustainability track next year of how does this interest align? Like, what can I do as someone who has this interest in sustainability, but is coming at it from the vantage point of the humanities, still someone who is involved with her community and is volunteering at community gardens and is doing the best she can. But how academically can I contribute to this is a question that I've definitely been asking and I'm going to get right back to. But first, I kind of wanted to talk about just like the highlights of humanities core first, because I think that that's a really important topic to talk about because I genuinely feel like the entire year has been a highlight, but I think that really like the community that I've found here has been like absolutely amazing. Like I know that people always are like, oh, community, 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 but I feel like genuinely like the group of people that I have found through humanities core, through my classes, like I love slowly throughout the year how I feel like I have met people because I've never stayed in a singular class. I've moved around between professors, so I've met tons of different people in humanities core in my seminars, and I feel like I always felt in the past like English classes were the best places to meet people, to meet like romantic relationships, but also to just meet like friends. I've always felt like they are the best places to meet people because you're talking about literature, you're talking about these amazing things. And so I found it to be really awesome the way that like as I advanced throughout the year that like I knew more and more people. Like when I was walking to seminar, I would like wave to more people and I could just felt like this deep sense of like, oh, like I know people. Like it felt I feel like college feels really big. And that's because like I personally chose and UC Irvine is like a massive campus. It is such a large campus. And so it can be sometimes kind of hard to find one's place. And I think that among a couple of other places, like my art history club, I think that the Honors College and I think also just Humanities Core itself has been a way that I've really found really nice connections and really good connections. Also, for goodness sake, to be a little bit personal, I actually found my boyfriend through Humanities Core. We met through doing dramatic readings of The Green Knight, and our first date was actually going to see the play of The Green Knight. So I would say that humanities core is important as well for my, to use the term, romantic entanglements as well. So humanities core, that was definitely a big highlight for me for finding wonderful friends and also for finding everyone else as well, for finding partners as well. But also in terms of just highlights academically, highlights from things that we've been learning about, I think going linearly, because I think linearly in this case is the best way to go, going against the tales of speculative fiction, the teachings of speculative fiction of working backwards, um, or working from the future backwards, to know what it's teaching you. I'm gonna start all the way at the beginning. So I will say, like, all the way back with Davis's lectures, like I've talked about the Green Knight. I loved the Green Knight. I loved writing and talking about this poetry. I thought it was amazing and so cool. I've always loved poetry analysis, and I've always wanted to sit and read like more stuff that was based on like Arthuric legend. Like that's something that I've really wanted to do before, and I never really had taken the time to do it. And so getting the chance to was like one of my first things I was talking about in college. I was like, wow, college is so cool. I am so glad. Like, how lucky am I that what I'm sitting around and doing is reading Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and getting to talk about that and watch A24 films and like do dramatic readings and that there's plays involved. Like, oh, like what an opportunity. And I think that that feeling of like, oh, like what an opportunity, like what an amazing chance. Like what an amazing place. What an amazing thing to learn. Has definitely continued throughout Hume Core for me. But I think like especially in the beginning, like there was just a deep sense of like, oh, like how what an amazing thing to be learning about. I think I remember like just to describe my voraciousness for learning I had in the beginning. Like I remember on the first day of class, going with my roommate actually to the library, and I was so amazed because I was like, yes, like library. I'm so excited to go to the library. And we went to the top floor of Langston Library with this, where some of the special collections are, I think. I think that's where one of the special collections are. And we sat on the patio and we basically like sat across from each other. And I remember researching fervently Wikipedia, everything, because Wikipedia was like pinnacle of knowledge for me at the moment. So I was I was researching on like Gaia theory and death drive and like all of this like eco thought because I was so inspired. Like I have my red notebook with me. I actually managed to contain all my notes. I'm very impressed with myself. All in one notebook. And I think you can see just on my first day, I like have just this list of just like notes and notes and notes. I'm trying to find them. Yes, I had a lot of notes and a lot of things that I wanted to say. All of that was stuff I was adding from my own Google searches. Of course, I don't do that anymore exactly, but I think I do still try to show up in that way for everything I've learning because humanities core makes it very easy, I feel, to really engross yourself in the material and to have this deep sense of curiosity, which I really appreciate. I feel like my curiosity has been rewarded in this class. Like I feel like there is no too deep one can go, which I think has been amazing. Um, I will also say I really enjoyed Pitt's lectures, specifically a lot of the talk about like plant talk. I thought that to be really interesting. I was talking to some other peers and I remembered them sort of talking about how they didn't really like it and how they thought it was a little bit silly and some other things. And I think even like, all right, my professor, he got like really bashed, but like I really thought that it had some serious validity to it, especially like from my time spent gardening, from my time spent interacting with the more than human world, like before I even like got to this class and studying it otherwise, but also just engaging with it. I genuinely do believe that like that is the case, that like these plants do have a certain living components to them that can hear and can respond to us. And I think that not recognizing that, I think that there's a danger in not recognizing that. So I think that perhaps the way I do not know if the way perhaps maybe the way it was framed for some people was a little bit silly or seemed a little bit frivolous. Especially I think if you're coming at this from a more scientific angle, I can understand that. But I think I understand it personally. Like I align with it. I'm someone who aligns in the camp, the theory of like, yes, plants are thinking. I get that, especially with their roots. Like, and especially like Like I'm thinking like Last of Us, which I know is a fictional show, but like the way that the plants like control and take over these zombies' minds. Like I feel like I don't know, man. Like I feel like there's something there. But I also really loved actually I went to a lot of the lectures, the side lectures, but I think one of my favorite ones that I went to was the one that was held at the extension of the Langston Library, Orange County Museum of Art. That one, that was where Nesbitt's exhibition was, where it was, I believe, a conversation between like Pitt, Nesbitt, and then a few other scientists as well. I actually got the chance to, as one of the first articles I wrote for New University, to go and to interview them and to talk to them. And that was an amazing opportunity. The article never got published, sadly, but I have the article. It's sitting somewhere. So I may link it under this if it is requested, I will link it. Um, I really just like I loved the way that they played off of each other and I loved this intersection of talking to scientists. Like I thought that was such a great idea. And I think that definitely informed a lot of how I've done my research recently. Like I think in winter quarter when I did research on the Etruscans for an archaeological class, I infused a lot of scientific study for that, or well, archaeological scientific study. And then also in my final paper that I wrote, I also made sure to check a lot of scientific journals. And that's how I ended up making some of my discovery about like mordants, which I would say check episode 2, episode 3 of what I've been talking about. But discovering basic, like doing that sort of scientific look as well, I think is really important for backing up this humanities argumentation because I think it really grounds it. I think it really grounds it in this sort of multidisciplinary look that I think is part of what the environmental humanities is doing, part of why it's so important and adds relevance both to the science, but also adds relevance to the humanities as well when both work together. I'd say I also love Shield's lectures. I think everyone loves Shield's lectures, but I especially like I really enjoyed Shield's lectures. Especially like talking about the feminine and how that's tied to care work and extraction. I thought that was really fascinating. I also really loved Carter's lectures. Like I think like I like I just think they were amazing. Like period. Like end of story. Like they were amazing. But I feel like they were speaking to this like deeper side of me. I love poetics. And especially like my mom is a professor in Roman history, and my dad is a professor in religious studies. So the convergence of talking about like all of this, like talking about this history, not quite Roman, but like talking about a lot of this history, then later into Roman, talking about all this history, and then also infusing it with this religion aspect, thought it was amazing and thought it was so cool. And I loved then like sharing it with my parents and having these like really in-depth conversations. So I loved talking about that. I'd also say I was not initially drawn by the film unit, but I've never really taken that close of a look at films. Like I'm someone who loves visual studies. Like I love talking about art, but I just never have considered like films in the same way. I've not really thought about them in that way, but I think like especially like being taught like all of these like really in-depth terms, like it felt really awesome, felt really cool. I can also say, to be a little bit more personal, I think like going into Gamber's like units, I was initially like one of the most excited for Gamber's units, especially like when he was doing his personal introduction and talking about himself. I felt like it was very crazy how many like personal alignments that I had with him. I also ran track and cross country in high school and was going to do it in college and then decided against it when I came to UCI. Chose against it against some other like scholarships to go elsewhere, chose to come here instead. And I also thought it was really funny that he taught at William and Mary because that is the school that my grandparents both went to. And so I actually also go there to like Williamsburg every year. And I debated going to William and Mary as a school. So I thought that was very funny. The schools that he talked about. And also I think his personal discussion of basically talking about how his family had told him that he was native, basically, that someone in his family had told him he was native, and so he had this story and this personal backstory, but that in all of the research that he's done, that he never really had found direct evidence of that. And I thought that that was especially interesting because in my own life, in my own personal story, um, my grandmother tells us, and I don't disbelieve her, but my grandmother does tell us that like her father, so my great grandfather, was native, but that he did not look native enough, and so that he was able to pass in that moment. And so I think getting to learn about native stuff, to put it in a colloquial way, getting to learn about it in a academic forum was really interesting, and it felt like a real to use the word to use like coming to it felt like a really coming to moment for me, to get to learn about that. I felt like I was able to talk to my grandmother in a better way as well, which is really awesome. And also I loved talking about post-apocalyptic young adult fiction. I have a personal theory that like, and I want to write someday on some Substack something like I feel like a lot of people nowadays, like if you look at what YA is, especially, I feel like it's especially very like dystopian, apocalyptic, like in the sort of, and that we are essentially like children of the apocalypse. And I think especially like I remember when I was little, like my parents loved watching The Walking Dead. And so I would always ask them to tell me about stories about The Walking Dead. And so they would tell me these stories about The Walking Dead as if they were sort of like campfire stories, like folktale stories. And so like when I was watching The Walking Dead for the first time about a year ago, I was like, wow, like like I remember everything that's going on, but I don't know what it ever looked like because my parents would just tell me stories about it instead. And I was being told these stories from probably the time I was like 7, like when I was 6. I mean, pretty little, pretty dang little, when I was being told these stories. Um, and so I think that that does something to the psyche and I think that's especially relevant within this sort of eco-conscious age. And this, I think that it's very interesting that we've been raised on stories of apocalypse when we are living in a sort of slow apocalypse itself that's much less visible. Um, yeah. I also think, um, yeah, I've discussed this before, discussed it a little bit before, but coming into this, like talking about just like some of like how I've advanced as a person, as a human, all of those other things. I feel like coming into this, I really had this love for the environment already. I was someone who was a runner. I love running in natural areas. I feel a deep connection to the natural world. I think there's something about pathfinding and wayfinding and not having a phone with you, but just finding your way and learning your area, that there's a certain autonomy to that and a certain power to that. But I also think it's just something that's like so important and such a profound sense of connection that I think that we lose when we're staring at our phones, when we're just like using maps all the time. And I think in Irvine, I think it's hard because I've been running less and I've been in the car more and on my phone more. So I know that I definitely want to come back to that, I think. But also like I garden and I even remember like I often try to practice sitting and listening and watching trees and just feeling very connected with the natural world. I did that a lot when I was in high school, like waiting for my mom to pick me up, for example, in front of a church. And I would sit and I would watch. I would sit and I would watch the trees basically blow, and I would just listen to the world go by. And I remember sometimes feeling superior to people who were like sitting on their phones and not really like talking. But yeah, I need to get back to that as well, I think. But generally, like I feel like Humanities Core has just given me this like really impressive language to engage with the more than human world, not just on a spiritual level, but like actually at like an academic level. Um, Having the words described like describe change and climate change are one of the most important things to actually like articulate its effects and others, package it and to change this culture that inherently controls us. I also think most of my struggles with humanities core, in terms of challenges, have mostly been in terms of not really understanding the material, because I've loved the material. I think I've been able to keep up with it. It's been sort of more a personal struggle. I think it's mostly been what I was describing before, that as an art historian, I struggled with finding exactly like what I could do to really make the world a better place, because I feel like the thought that they kept coming back to was understanding the culture, and that it was important to understand the culture, and changing the culture is inherently important. But I think I kept asking questions of like, I feel like even if we change the like how do you change a culture? Like that is an insurmountable, massive task. What does me sitting here and analyzing an artwork, like what does that have to do with changing the culture, you know? And I think like in a burning and dying world, to put it dramatically, but not too dramatically, like what does me sitting and talking about an artwork have to do with it? Especially like I feel like there's something that feels kind of silly about like going to a museum and like looking at all the artworks. Like I love that deep in my core. But when in the midst of so many other things, like the preservation of an artwork is so inherently important, but it is so against like the natural order of the environment, like to go back to Carter, like this idea of like constant change and constant transformation of matter and material, like to hold matter and material inert and stable and fixed. That's something that goes against the natural order of things. And so I don't know. I just struggled with it, and I struggle with it in myself as I've been engaging with this material, and I've been trying to find and trying to understand like what does me talking about an artwork, talking about this sort of thing, doing this thing that I love and love with all of my soul and all of my heart, like what can I do, you know? And so I think what I've come to is I realized, at least with the museum aspect first, that like these elements need to be preserved. That as much as they like go against like the natural order of things, as I put it before, that it's important to preserve these cultural objects. Otherwise, I mean, I wouldn't be able to look at something like greenery, the tapestry that I analyzed, wouldn't be able to look at Turner's works, for example, wouldn't be able to look at many of the artworks that we have analyzed in class and that we haven't analyzed in class that exist out in museums preserved, and that it is a good thing that those things exist. I mean, that's part of why I am majoring in art history and minoring in archaeology. It's because I believe that there is a purpose in having these cultural objects because they allow for this encounter, they allow for this engagement that is desperately important and desperately necessary in this modern world. Um, and I also think that just there's this process of looking closely at an artwork, and it almost becomes like a close looking, but also a close listening. It becomes a conversation. And I think that that conversation, especially when it is environmental one, if we are able to have it sitting in front of an object, if we're not able to have it elsewhere, if we are at least able to have it in a museum space, a space where people like to go, where it's a cultural center, where people go to museums, I think that that's really important. I think that's a really important thing. Um, and I think that what I've come to is not just this idea of changing the culture, because frankly, that's something that is just as Cthulhu-like, just as eldritch, you may call it, you know? So I think what I have realized, especially with Long's conclusion that thinking is a type of care work, that there is something important to my thought, that there's something important to me sitting and thinking and reflecting and writing about what I have to say about an artwork. Because if I am able to show how to engage, how like one possible avenue of engaging with an artwork, then I think that that can help people to see, help people to see closely, but also to help people see and engage in their own ways. I think the humanities is an invitation. It is always an invitation when you are making and when you are writing. So I think when I see it as a conversation, when I see it as something that can draw people in, not to necessarily immediately change the culture at this grand level, but when I have the belief that I can even change like a single person with what I write, to invite them to see something a little bit closer, and not think exactly what I think, but to think anything, to have their mind change, to open their perspective, I think that is a beautiful thing. And I think that humanities course taught me how to do that. But I think also it has just given me the tools to allow me to continue to expand upon it as I move into taking sustainability classes in the future, as I move into other art history classes, French classes, archaeology classes, as I continue to move on with my college career and then hopefully master's, PhD, and just into my later life. So yeah. Yeah, I also think just as like a critical thinker, I think that I've improved massively. I think I didn't realize in high school classes, AP classes, how when I proposed a slightly contradictory idea that ran against the grain, there was this response of "that's interesting," but there wasn't any really follow-up. And then they kept looking for that like right thought, and that happened in AP Gov classes, AP Lit classes, history classes, all the history classes I took. There was always this like right thought they were trying to arrive at. And I can say that in humanities core, there's never been a too deep. There's never been like just there's never been a too deep. There's never been a moment where I've felt like strangely silenced. I feel like when I'm reflecting and when I'm thinking back, I think I've been able to let my critical thinking like flow and to let it flow creatively. And I feel like it's been rewarded. And I think that's really powerful in humanities core. I think most of, to get back to talking about challenges for a second, like I think I talked about it in my last episode, but genuinely most of my challenges revolved around early essay writing and feeling like I didn't know if people knew what I was trying to say. And I think that that was hard because I think that I was distracted by a lot of things at the time. I think there were a lot of things going on, so it was hard to find the time to focus and to give myself the permission that my thoughts mattered and that it was important to sit and to think and to wrestle with my thoughts. And so I think as I have finished up my year of humanities core, I think I realized that yeah, like that my writing matters, that it's important what I have to say. And I think it's important what I have to say, I've realized in the avenues of art, and that I don't need to be someone who is, perhaps it sounds silly, but I don't need to be someone who is a scientist to make an impact. That I, if I think deeply and if I borrow from science and I fuse these thoughts together and I allow for conversation to happen, if I can inspire conversation in a viewer, if I can inspire conversation between the science and the humanities, and never think that I am the only expert, but instead have conversation within community, which humanities core has taught me to do, I think that I will be very well suited. And I think that the world will be a better place. So, on that hopeful note, thank you for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day.